Welcome to the Ibua Journal Conversations, hosted here at the Sankara Pan-African Library and Cafe. My name is David Kangye, and I'm glad to be your host. We are going to be in conversation with the contributors of their mirrors and happiness issues. And I'm excited to be hosting a very wonderful contributor to the journal, who also doubles as a big shot at Ibua Publishing. She will be telling us more about that. But I'm excited to be your host, David Kangye, once again, and my guest right here is
Karungi Kwatampora. Thank you so much for hosting me once again.
Thank you. Charity, you're one of the people whose work is, what can I say, is one of the works that it's highlighted in this series,
Yes.
HappyNess. And I'm excited that we're going to be talking about the pursuit of happiness as Africa rises. This conversation has been around, I think, for the last one decade. Africa Rising, there's a lot of stuff that has been said.
Yeah.
Conferences held outside Africa on Africa Rising, a lot of is it expatriates or the experts, whatever that is, on Africa Rising who are not from Africa. It's one of those contradicting topics, because the people concerned about Africa Rising are not necessarily those on the African continent. Yet there is a lot also happening on the continent about Africa Rising. Africa has quite a young population, a very active population, no jobs, willing labor, and all this. We've had most African countries count on remittances as one of the biggest contributors of their foreign income earners, and also GDP. We also have a big export of labor. And recently, I think this is where we're going to start from. We were told, I think it was the Observer, and something which you highlight in your essay, that 2,000 Ugandans between the age of 18 and 30 leave the country to go to work abroad. And chances are, in every 10 people you know, there is someone who has left the country to go and work somewhere else. I'm wondering, why did you choose this particular topic when writing about happiness? Where is the happiness in the first place in all this?
Actually, because the title is the pursuit of happiness as Africa rises, So for me, what inspired it was a combination of factors. There is the ongoing discussion around the migration, the recent migration, especially to the Middle East. Right? And the Observer article, I believe it was last month, said 2,000 Ugandans leave every month. Right?
Every month.
It's hard to believe that's per month. So over a year's span, that's 24,000 Ugandans leaving for work in the Middle East, and most are getting jobs for unskilled labor, whether it is as housemaids or truck drivers, security, unskilled work, because getting skilled work is more complicated, right? Unheard of, and it's expensive. It's an expensive process either way. So there was that element. You have these stories just rattling around. You also have the stories of the ones who've come back, either they're missing organs, because we've had more reports of some returning home alive or dead, but with missing organs, all these crazy stories. But also added to that was the fact that I just happened to be in Entebbe and seeing at the airport and watching a set of young girls.
Because most of the people going are girls.
Are girls, yes. And I was just watching this set of young girls going through the process, going through departure and everything. And at the back of my head, I'm like, why? Why would they go? And yet, despite all the stories we've had, despite all these things that we've been hearing, and that's really what brought me to.
How different is this migration from that of the late 80s or even the 70s, when so many people were going, especially to Europe, and people left? But how different is that from this?
And I think, just to clarify that, I think the essay is not even so much about migration, right? Because people will migrate, whether it's in country or out of the country, will migrate for whatever reasons there are. The recent one, though, seems to be deadlier, right? In the last decade, the journey, the process of migrating.
When you say deadlier, what is included in that bracket?
So let me expand it to the decade. Not just this year, the decade. You have the stories of the migrant ships, capsizing. You've got the stories of migrants being, whether it's in Southern Europe or wherever, at border points being killed, or just exposed to so much harm. You've got the slave trade happening in North Africa. Migrants from west and northern parts of Africa getting caught up in areas like Libya, and all of that. But then now you've got the stories coming out of the Middle East. Some people argue they are not necessarily new, but it's just there's been louder noise about the conditions of and maybe that is aided by social media, because whether it's TikTok or Insta, you've got these stories. Every day you've got a story of what life is like in whether it's in the UAE or so. It feels deadlier now.
You say Kampala is a place of contradiction. I like that. Tell us more about it. Our Kampala here. This Kampala we know?
I think Kampala is like any city, I would imagine, any place really. But it's a place where you've got all these signs of growth, economic growth or social growth, but at the same time you've also got the elements that keep other people trapped. Like it seems some people can access the goodness out of it, while other people are stuck, trapped within whatever perpetuates poverty, for them and stuff. So it just has all that shiny and which is not so much, someone would say that's not different for anywhere else.
Is there hope?
Is there hope? In which regard? Concerning what?
It's the thing, when usually every time, and it's that old saying that the success of a journey depends on the load carried back home. And sometimes the load is as good as a package of stories. What people saw when they traveled, or whatever they saw to the destinations they went to. Usually what we have are stories from urban, rural. The stories, you have rural, urban, that's the first journey, and then the back, rural, urban. And urban, rural, and the return journey. When people come back from urban centers, the stories they tell of the things they have been able to do or see are usually the inspiration as to why people want to go. Tomorrow, when a story is released of someone who has lost a life in Saudi Arabia, it will not deter 30 people from going to apply for a passport to go to the same destination. And this kind of thing, that where is the hope, or is there hope anyway for the future, for a better future, for, will things ever work out in this place of contradiction?
I would like to say yes.
Okay.
I'd like to say yes, and yet at the same time, I feel like I have lived long enough to know that maybe I'm being too idealistic, that some things will, without intentional change in our structures, whether it's the political or socio-economic, that there will not, some things will continue to be perpetuated. And I think that for me is the concern. So as a continent, Africa has the youngest median age. I think it's 17 point something, right? When you look at the natural progression of any society, that young age is a huge asset for us, right? As a country and as a continent. And we have one of the fastest growing populations. While other continents are talking about, slowed growth and all, Africa's populations continue to grow, and within a few years will be the fastest growing population, which is great, right? All of that has potential because that means we've got labor, we've got consumers, because you need consumers, right? With increased education, with increased with better health, that means we live longer. So we've got a workforce that will exist longer, that kind of thing. So all those things have great potential for us as a country and as a continent. Those things can be harnessed, right? They can be harnessed, but when you look at what's happening it's not just Uganda, but across the continent, the investments that governments are making, the investments, whether it's in education or health, or just create jobs. The reason people are leaving in such numbers is because they can't find good jobs here, When you look at the investments our governments are making, it's just, it begs the question.
They are the way they are.
Exactly. It begs the question, can we be hopeful? But I think we can be hopeful, I think we can be hopeful.
Okay. Yeah. You said there will always be movement.
Yeah.
And is there a possibility of seeing movement from the urban to rural? Because what we have today is from rural
to urban.
And that has been forever. Most of us are products of rural-urban migration anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'd say that the urban to rural would end up being urbanization, right? Yeah. So that is going to happen. That's happening, as you see, whether it's Kampala or others, towns expanding outwards. For example, take the Greater Kampala expansion, right? So someone says it's going urban to rural. We are taking over
most of the rural areas.
Yes, in those, whether it's Mukono, what was Gayaza, Wakiso,
Okay.
That's urban to rural, right?
Okay. And what I find in all this is that low-key, you're trying to bring out the argument that we have a role to play as individuals in changing the narrative. Do we?
I think, actually, I like that you use narrative, because I think at the heart of my essay is the issue of who's driving that narrative of Africa rising. So, we've grown up, at least I have, you've grown up with all these negative narratives about Africa. We are a dark continent. We are, all these things, diseased, poor, uneducated, all these negative aspects of who we are that deny who we are. So an outsider telling us what we are as opposed to appreciating or celebrating who we are. And so I've grown up with that, but then maybe 20 years ago or something like that, 15, 20, you start to hear Africa rising. And in the essay I point out that it's reflected with Time magazine. Right? Because there's a shift. Time magazine, their headlines go from the dark continent to now suddenly Africa rising, the new frontier, and all of those things. And so it begs the question, while it's wonderful and catchy and exciting, it begs the question, why? Why the shift? And from an economic perspective, you see why. Whether it's now or in the next 10, 15 years, we are going to be a substantial chunk of the global labor force, right? If we are educated and skilled, we are going to be even more valuable as skilled labor. Once we are living longer, we also form the consumers.
Yeah.
So you've got all these large.
So what you're trying to say is that there is the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But also there is a smaller picture.
Yeah.
So there is an individual responsibility to this.
Yes, it's important for us to take charge of that narrative.
Okay.
It's
and
important.
How do we take charge?
How do we take charge? Well, I'm not so sure, because you keep saying the individual, and I keep wondering how. But I think it's perhaps advocacy for those of us who can. Advocacy that you have governments, the people that are charged with these things, making the right investments for the wider population. Advocacy to see that they do that, right? That we are investing in education, we're investing in health. Unfortunately, even when you look at the COVID period, we scaled back on education and health spending and increased, military. But these are the drivers, So when you're looking at it, the demographic dividend, right? The arguments are that in the next 2050 is how long away?
2050,
27 years, 28 years, right? Over the next 28 years, we will arrive at a point where we have the accelerated growth, potential for accelerated growth, right? But key to that is education and health.
Yes.
So you need a well-educated population, equals skilled, and that's skilled, which is healthy, right? But when you assess UPE or USE, you wonder whether we are making the right investments in that regard. I mean, why are UPE parents still arguing? This is how many years later? Why are they still struggling to get basics like food? Why are those still a conflict issue? Why are teachers striking because of arrears? Why are we arguing about the arts and the sciences?
Development comes with conflict, so some of these devils you have to deal with.
It does come with conflict, no doubt, but you want to, when you go back to the question of hope, it's inevitable with our numbers, with our population, it's inevitable that we will arrive at 2050 with a population size so much, at whatever level. That population size will be the fastest or the second fastest, most likely the fastest at that point. They will need, they'll be labor, they'll be consumers, they will have all these needs. It's inevitable.
I'm glad that you're already addressing this when you come up to write about this topic. It's such a sensitive topic and very broad in nature because, everyone is affected, everyone has a role to play, I guess so. And I think for me, having a platform like this, the Ep1 journal, where we can have these stories shared and published, I guess it is an advantage to us that we have to advance this cause. And so far so good. The fact that you're already writing and the pursuit of happiness as Africa rises will not bring itself. It has to be engineered and also driven. And this is what we are doing. Thank you very much, Charity, for sharing your time with me, but also writing for writing as a contributor to these essays. Thank you for watching this episode of the Ep1 Journal Conversations. A big thank you to our hosts, Sankara Pan-African Library and Cafe. To watch more of these conversations, visit www.ep1publishing.com.